The great hall of the Galactic Institute buzzed with strange voices and alien sounds. Creatures from 47 different worlds sat in floating chairs that moved around the room like slow dancers. Some had scales that changed colors. Others looked like walking crystals. A few were just clouds of glowing gas held together by metal rings. Dr. Kang Minho sat in the back row, trying not to feel small. He was the only human in the entire building. His simple gray suit looked plain next to the fancy robes and armor, worn by the other scientists. The chair he sat in was too big for him. It had been made for a creature twice his size. Minho checked his watch. Back on Earth, it was 3 a.m. His research partner, Yun Hyun, would be sleeping in her tiny apartment in Seoul. She had wanted to come with him, but Earth could only afford to send one person to this meeting. They had picked Minho because he could speak the common galactic language better than most humans. The huge screen at the front of the hall lit up with bright symbols. A voice spoke through the translation device in Minho's ear. "Welcome to the annual Stellar Engineering Symposium. Today we will hear from Professor Vel Nash of Altair Prime." A creature that looked like a giant blue octopus with golden eyes moved to the center of the room. Professor Vel Nash was old, very old. Everyone knew his name. He had written books that were famous across the galaxy. When he spoke, even the proudest alien leaders listened. "My fellow scientists," Vel Nash began, his voice deep and smooth. "Today I will present proof of something we have suspected for 800 years. No species in this galaxy can harvest the full power of a star." The room became silent. Even the creatures that normally made constant humming noises stopped their sounds. Vel Nash waved one of his long arms. The screen filled with numbers and charts. "I call this the Stellar Harvest Impossibility Theorem. The math is simple. The engineering is not." Minho leaned forward in his chair. The numbers on the screen were huge. They talked about the power that came from stars like Earth's sun. One star made more energy in 1 second than most planets used in a whole year. To capture this power, Vel Nash continued, a species would need to build a shell around an entire star. This shell would need to be millions of times larger than any planet. It would need materials that can survive heat that melts everything we know. It would need to be built without any mistakes because one small error would destroy everything. More numbers filled the screen. They showed how much metal would be needed, how much time it would take, how many workers would be required. The numbers were so big they seemed like jokes. "My theorem proves that such a project is impossible," Vel Nash said. His golden eyes seemed to look at each creature in the room. "Even the great engineering races of the Vegan system cannot do this. Even the machine minds of the core worlds have given up on this dream. It simply cannot be done." Many heads nodded around the room. Some creatures made clicking sounds that meant agreement. Others flashed their scales in patterns that showed respect for Vel Nash's wisdom. But Minho frowned. Something felt wrong about the numbers on the screen. He pulled out his small computer and started doing his own math. The more he calculated, the more confused he became. A creature that looked like living crystal spoke up. "Professor Vel Nash, what about the young races? Have any of them tried to solve this problem?" Vel Nash made a sound that might have been laughter. "The young races? They can barely manage fusion reactors. Most of them still burn chemical fuels to leave their planets. They think small because they are small." "What about the humans?" asked another voice. Now Vel Nash definitely laughed. "Humans? They have been in space for less than 100 of their years. They have visited only their own moon and a few small planets. They are children playing with toys." Minho felt his face get hot. He looked around the room and saw that some creatures were also laughing. Others just looked bored, as if humans were not worth thinking about. "But Professor," Minho said, standing up. His voice sounded small in the huge room. "I think there might be an error in your calculations." The laughter stopped. Every eye, crystal, and sensor in the room turned to look at Minho. He had never felt so alone in his life. Vel Nash's golden eyes focused on him. "You are the human representative, are you not? Dr. Kang Minho from the planet Earth?" "Yes, sir." "And you believe you have found an error in work that has been checked by the greatest minds in the galaxy?" Minho's hands were shaking, but he kept his voice steady. Your theorem assumes that we need to build one giant structure. But what if we used many small structures instead? Impossible, Velnash said quickly. Small structures cannot capture enough energy to be useful. They would be destroyed by solar wind and radiation. The math does not work. But what if the small structures could fix themselves? What if they could work together like a team? Young human, Velnash said, and his voice was not kind anymore. You clearly do not understand the forces involved. A star is not a campfire. It is a nuclear furnace that could destroy your entire planet in seconds. Your species has not even learned to control the weather on your own world. How can you think you understand stellar engineering? More laughter filled the room. Some creatures made sounds that Minho's translator could not even convert into words. He sat down, his face red with shame. But as the laughter died down, Minho made a promise to himself. He would prove that humans could think big. He would show these advanced aliens that sometimes the youngest student in the class had the best ideas. The meeting continued for hours. Other scientists presented their research on smaller problems. They talked about better engines for spaceships. They shared new ways to grow food on dead planets. All useful things, but nothing as big as capturing the power of a star. When the symposium finally ended, Minho walked quickly to his small room. He activated his communication device and waited for the signal to reach Earth. After several minutes, Hyun's sleepy face appeared on the screen. Minho, how did it go? They laughed. At us, he said. They think humans are too young and stupid to solve real problems. Hyun sat up in her bed. She could see the anger and hurt in her friend's eyes. What kind of problem? They say it's impossible to capture all the energy from a star. This famous professor has mathematical proof that it cannot be done. Hyun was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. You know what? I don't believe in impossible. Send me everything you learned today. Let's see if these old aliens are as smart as they think they are. Minho smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Hyun, we're going to need help. This is bigger than just the two of us. Then we'll get help. We'll call everyone we know. Park Jisoo from the Materials Lab, Lee Donghyun from Orbital Mechanics, Kim Sora from Quantum Physics. If they want to see what young humans can do, we'll show them. As Minho ended the call, he looked out his window at the alien stars. Somewhere out there, ancient civilizations had given up on their greatest dream because a math problem told them it was impossible. But humans had always been good at proving that impossible things were just hard things that nobody had figured out yet. 3 weeks had passed since the meeting at the Galactic Institute. Back on Earth in a small research lab in Seoul, 5 humans sat around a table covered with papers, coffee cups, and computer screens. The room smelled like instant noodles and determination. Yoon Hyun pointed at a drawing on the wall. It showed a star surrounded by thousands of tiny dots. This is our idea, she said. Instead of building one huge shell around the sun, we build millions of small collectors. Park Jisoo looked up from her microscope. She was a small woman with paint-stained fingers from working with metal samples all day. The aliens think big because they are big, she said. But humans think small. We make tiny things that work together to do big jobs. Lee Donghyun nodded from his corner desk. His computer showed the path of planets around the sun. Look at how birds fly south for winter, he said. One bird cannot make the trip alone, but thousands of birds flying together can cross oceans. Sora held up a strange device that glowed with blue light. Energy is like water, she said. You cannot carry an ocean in your hands, but you can use many pipes to move an ocean anywhere you want. Minho looked at his friends and felt proud. These were not the greatest scientists on Earth. They were just young people with good ideas and stubborn attitudes. But maybe that was exactly what they needed. Show me how it works, Minho said. Jisoo stood up and walked to a box full of metal pieces. Each piece was smaller than a coin, but they sparkled like jewels. These are smart materials, she said. They can copy themselves using any metal they find. 1 piece becomes 2 pieces. 2 pieces become 4 pieces. 4 pieces become 8 pieces. She dropped 1 piece into a bowl of metal powder. Slowly, the powder began to move. After a few minutes, there were 2 pieces in the bowl. then 4, then 8. How long does this take? Minho asked. In space, with lots of metal from asteroids. Very fast, Jisoo said. 1 year to make 1,000,000 pieces. 2 years to make 1,000,000,000 pieces. Donghyun pulled up a new picture on his computer. It showed thousands of small objects flying in perfect circles around a star. Each collector is smart, he said. They talk to each other. They know where to go. If the star gets hotter, they move away. If the star gets cooler, they move closer. What happens when the star has solar flares? Minho asked. Solar flares were huge explosions of energy that could destroy anything near a star. Watch this, Donghyun said. He pressed a button, and the objects on his screen scattered like fish when a shark appears. Then, when the danger passed, they came back together. They do not fight the star. They dance with it. Sora connected her glowing device to the computer. This is how we send the energy to Earth, she said. The screen showed beams of light traveling from the collectors to a station on Earth. Quantum energy transmission. No energy is lost, no wires needed. Haeun looked at all the pieces of their plan. So we start with one collector near our sun. It makes more collectors. Those collectors make even more collectors. Soon we have millions of them working together. How long would it take? Minho asked. 10 years to surround our sun completely, Donghyun said. But we would start getting useful energy after just 1 year. Jisoo laughed. The aliens want to build something bigger than planets. We want to build something smaller than cars that works better than anything they can imagine. While the humans worked on their plan, news of their project spread through the galaxy. At first, other species thought it was funny. On the planet Vega Prime, crystal beings shared jokes about human foolishness. On the gas giant Altair, ancient creatures made bets about how quickly the human project would fail. Professor Velnash heard about the human project during his morning meditation. His assistant, a young Altarian named Krelenth, brought him the news. The humans are trying to solve the stellar energy problem, Krelenth said, his tentacles waving with amusement. Of course they are, Velnash replied. Young species always think they can do what older species cannot. It is like children thinking they can fly by flapping their arms. Should we watch their progress? Why waste time? Mathematics does not lie. My theorem proves that stellar energy capture is impossible. The humans will learn this lesson like every other species has learned it. But Krelenth was curious. He secretly began monitoring human communications. What he found surprised him. The human approach was completely different from anything any species had tried before. Most alien races tried to build bigger machines. The humans were building smaller machines that worked as a team. Most aliens tried to fight against the power of stars. The humans were trying to work with that power. On Earth, the human team faced their first big test. They needed to prove their small collectors could survive in space near their sun. The test would use only 100 collectors, but it would show if their idea could work. Are you ready? Haeun asked Minho over their video call. He was still at the Galactic Institute, but he watched everything through his computer. Send them up, Minho said. A small rocket launched from Earth carrying 100 tiny collectors. Each collector was the size of a dinner plate, but contained more computer power than the entire first spaceship that took humans to their moon. The collectors flew toward the sun and spread out in a perfect circle. Their solar panels opened like flower petals. Their communication systems started talking to each other and to Earth. Energy collection at 12%, Sora reported. 15%, she said a few minutes later. 20% and rising. The collectors were working. They were actually capturing energy from the sun and sending it back to Earth. Not much energy yet, but enough to prove the idea was real. But then something unexpected happened. The sun released a small solar flare. It was not big enough to hurt Earth, but it was big enough to destroy the collectors. Here it comes, Donghyun said, watching his screens. The collectors detected the solar flare before it reached them. Without any commands from Earth, they began to move. Some flew behind others for protection. Some changed their solar panels to reflect the dangerous energy instead of absorbing it. Some even used the flare's own energy to push themselves to safety. When the flare passed, all 100 collectors were still working. "Did you see that?" Hyun asked, her voice full of excitement. "They saved themselves," Jisoo said. "The collectors learned how to survive without us telling them what to do." At the Galactic Institute, Krelenth watched the human test with growing amazement. He had never seen anything like it. The human collectors had not just survived, they had adapted. He thought about telling Professor Velnash what he had seen, but he decided to wait. Let the humans continue their work. Let them show what they could really do. Maybe, just maybe, these young humans were not as foolish as everyone thought. Back on Earth, Minho's friends were already planning their next test. 100 collectors had worked. Next time, they would try 1,000, then 10,000, then 1,000,000. The impossible dream was becoming possible, one small step at a time. 6 months after the first test, the human team had grown from 5 people to 50. Scientists from around Earth wanted to help with the project that everyone now called the Sun Catchers. The small lab in Seoul had moved to a bigger building. The coffee machine worked overtime. Cho Hyunwoo sat in front of 12 computer screens, each one showing thousands of moving dots. He was building the brain that would control millions of collectors at the same time. His eyes were red from staying awake for 3 days straight. "Hyunwoo, you need to sleep," Hyun said, bringing him another cup of coffee. "Can't sleep," he replied, typing code faster than most people could read. "I almost have it working. The collectors need to think like a school of fish. Each one follows simple rules, but together they make smart decisions." On the other side of the room, Shin Minji drew charts on a whiteboard covered with numbers. She was trying to solve a problem that had kept her awake for weeks. Where would they get enough metal to build millions of collectors? "We cannot mine enough metal from Earth," she said to herself. "Earth does not have enough iron and copper for what we need." Lee Donghyun looked up from his orbital calculations. "What about asteroids? There are millions of rocks in space full of metal." Minji's eyes lit up. "Yes, the collectors can eat asteroids. They take metal from space rocks and use it to make more collectors. They feed themselves while they work." She wrote new numbers on the board. "Start with 1,000 collectors. Send them to an asteroid. They eat the asteroid and make 10,000 collectors. Those collectors eat more asteroids and make 100,000 collectors. How long until we have enough collectors to surround the sun?" Haeun asked. Minji did the math quickly. 3 years. Maybe less if we find big asteroids. Across the galaxy, other species were starting to pay attention to the human project. The first test with 100 collectors had been noticed by a few scientists. But when the humans tested 1,000 collectors, then 10,000 collectors, the news spread faster. On the crystal world of Vega Prime, the Council of Shining Minds held an emergency meeting. These ancient beings had ruled their part of the galaxy for thousands of years. They were not used to being surprised by anything. "The humans are doing something impossible," said the first mind, a crystal being that glowed with purple light. "Impossible things do not happen," replied the second mind, who glowed with blue light. "Therefore, the humans are not doing what we think they are doing." "Then explain these energy readings," the third mind said, showing data from their deep space sensors. "The human star is producing more organized energy than any star should produce." The council sat in silence. For the first time in centuries, they did not know what to think. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Institute, Professor Velnash was having the worst month of his very long life. His assistant Krelenth brought him reports about the human project every day. Each report made less sense than the last one. "They have 50,000 collectors working now," Krelenth said, his tentacles trembling with excitement. "Each collector talks to every other collector. They move like one giant creature with 50,000 eyes." "Impossible," Velnash said, but his voice was not as strong as before. 50,000 objects cannot coordinate their actions. The communication delays alone would make it impossible. "But they are doing it," Krelenth insisted. "They use quantum communication. Information travels instantly between collectors. There are no delays." Velnash looked at the data again. The numbers showed that the human collectors were capturing energy with an efficiency rate of 95%. His mathematical theorem said that no system could achieve more than 60% efficiency. There must be an error in the measurements, he said. But deep in his ancient heart, Velnash was beginning to suspect that the error might be in his own work. Back on Earth, Hyunwoo finally solved the coordination problem. His breakthrough came when he stopped thinking about the collectors as separate machines and started thinking about them as one living organism. "Look at this," he said, showing his code to the rest of the team. Each collector follows 4 simple rules. Stay close to your neighbors. Match the speed of your neighbors. Avoid collisions. Move toward the best energy source. "That's it?" Jisoo asked. "Just 4 rules?" "Just 4 rules," Hyunwoo confirmed. But when 50,000 collectors all follow the same 4 rules, they become smart. They solve problems together that none of them could solve alone. He showed them a simulation on his computer. Thousands of dots moved around a bright circle representing the sun. When he added a solar flare to the simulation, the dots scattered and regrouped like a flock of birds avoiding a predator. "They learn," he said with wonder in his voice. "The system actually learns and gets better at its job." Sora looked up from her quantum transmitter. "I have good news too. We can now send energy from the collectors to anywhere in the solar system. Mars, Jupiter, even beyond Pluto. No energy loss at all. The implications hit everyone at the same time. If they could capture all the energy from their sun and send it anywhere, humanity would never run out of power. They could build cities on Mars. They could explore other star systems. They could do things that had seemed impossible just 1 year ago. We need to test the full system, Haeyoon said. 100,000 collectors. Full coordination. Full energy capture. When? Minho asked from his video screen. He was still at the Galactic Institute, but he spent most of his time now watching his friends work. Next month, Donghyun said. I have calculated the optimal positions for 100,000 collectors. They will form a partial shell around the sun. Not complete coverage, but enough to prove our system works at full scale. As the team prepared for their biggest test yet, messages started arriving from other worlds. Some were offers of help. Some were warnings, a few were threats. The Vegan Empire sent a formal message. Humans are advised that stellar engineering without proper permits is illegal under Galactic Law Section 847.3. The Altarian Republic was more direct. Stop your experiments before you damage something important. But there were friendly messages, too. Young scientists from 12 different worlds asked if they could study the human approach. 3 different species offered to share their own research in exchange for information about the collector system. Professor Velnash read all these messages with growing unease. For 800 years, his theorem had been accepted truth. No species questioned it. No species even tried to solve the stellar energy problem anymore. Now these young humans were not just questioning his work. They were proving it wrong with actual results. He made a decision that surprised even himself. For the first time in centuries, he began to recalculate his own mathematics. Maybe, just maybe, he had made an error 800 years ago. As the human team worked 18-hour days to prepare for their biggest test, none of them knew that the galaxy's greatest living scientist was quietly checking their homework. The breakthrough was coming, not just for humanity, but for everyone. The day of the great test had arrived. In the mission control room in Seoul, dozens of humans sat at computer stations. Large screens on the walls showed the sun surrounded by empty space that would soon be filled with 100,000 collectors. Sung-min sat in his spacecraft 3 million kilometers from Earth. His job was to release the collectors at exactly the right moment. He was nervous but excited. No human had ever been this close to such an important moment in history. How are you feeling up there, Sung-min? Haeyoon asked through the radio. Like I'm about to change the world, he replied, looking at the cargo bay full of collector units. Each unit was small, but together they represented years of human work and dreams. On Earth, Han Yeji checked her communication equipment one more time. She was responsible for broadcasting the test to the Galactic Institute. 47 different species would be watching. Some hoped the humans would succeed. Others hoped they would fail spectacularly. "Broadcasting to the galaxy in 10 minutes, she announced. At the Galactic Institute, Professor Velnash sat in the front row of the Great Hall, the same hall where he had laughed at human ideas 1 year ago. Today, he was not laughing. He had spent months rechecking his mathematics. He had found small errors that made big differences. Krelenth sat beside his old teacher. "Are you nervous, Professor?" "I am terrified," Velnash admitted. "If the humans succeed today, everything I have taught for 800 years is wrong. And if they fail, then I will feel terrible for hoping they would fail." Around the galaxy, millions of beings watched their screens. On crystal worlds, gas giants, and metal planets, species that had given up on stellar engineering long ago waited to see what the young humans could do. In Seoul, Minho's voice came through the speakers from his room at the Institute. "All stations, report ready status." "Orbital mechanics ready," Donghyun said. "AI coordination ready," Hyunwoo said. "Energy transmission ready," Sora said. "Materials systems ready," Jisoo said. "Resource management ready," Minji said. "Broadcasting ready," Yeji said. "Deployment ready," Seungmin said from space. Haeun took a deep breath. "Beginning collector deployment in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, deploy." Seungmin pressed the release button. 100,000 collectors flew out of his cargo bay like a silver cloud. They spread out in perfect formation, each one following its programmed path toward the sun. On the screens in Seoul, the collectors appeared as tiny dots of light. But as they got closer to the sun, they began to arrange themselves in a complex pattern. It looked like a giant net made of stars. "First 1,000 collectors in position," Dongyan reported. "AI coordination active," Hyunwoo said. "All units responding to group commands." "Energy collection starting," Sora announced. "We have power flow." In the Great Hall of the Galactic Institute, creatures that had lived for thousands of years watched in amazement. The human collectors were actually working. They were capturing energy from a star and sending it through space with no wires, no massive structures, just coordinated teamwork. But then the real test began. The sun, as if it knew it was being watched, released a massive solar flare. It was 10 times bigger than any flare the collectors had faced before. The wave of deadly energy raced toward the small human machines at the speed of light. "Solar flare detected," Seungmin called out. "It's a big one." On Earth, emergency alarms started ringing. This was the moment everyone had feared. One solar flare could destroy years of work in seconds. "What do we do?" someone shouted. "Nothing," Hyunwoo said calmly. "We trust the system." The EU collectors detected the incoming flare 12 seconds before it reached them. Without any commands from Earth, they began to move. Some collectors formed protective groups around others. Some changed their solar panels to deflect energy instead of collecting it. Some used the flare's own force to push themselves to safety. But, most amazingly, some collectors actually moved closer to the flare. They positioned themselves to capture the extra energy and channel it safely away from the more fragile units. "They're not just surviving," Sora said with wonder in her voice. "They're using the flare as a power source." The solar flare passed through the collector swarm like water flowing around rocks. When it was over, all 100,000 collectors were still working. In fact, they were working better than before. The system had learned from the experience. "Energy efficiency at 97.4%, Sora reported. "That's higher than our best computer simulations predicted." In the galactic broadcast, the silence was complete. Species that had existed for millions of years had never seen anything like this. The humans had not just solved an impossible problem, they had made it look easy. Professor Velnash stood up slowly. His 8 arms trembled as he reached for his communication device. "Dr. Minho, can you hear me?" "Yes, Professor Velnash," Minho replied. "I owe you an apology. I owe your entire species an apology. You have accomplished something that I said was mathematically impossible." "Thank you, Professor. But I must ask, How did you know this would work? Minho smiled, even though Velnash could not see him. We didn't know. We just believed that impossible problems are really just hard problems that nobody has solved yet. On the crystal world of Vega Prime, the Council of Shining Minds held an emergency session. The humans have done something we thought was impossible, the first mind said. Then our understanding of possibility was incomplete, the second mind replied. What do we do now? Asked the third mind. We learn from them, all three said together. Across the galaxy, the same conversation was happening on hundreds of worlds. Species that had ruled star systems for millennia were suddenly asking themselves what else they might have been wrong about. But the biggest change was happening in Professor Velnash's ancient heart. For 800 years, he had been the teacher. Today, he realized he needed to become a student again. Dr. Minho, he said into his communication device. Would it be possible for me to visit Earth? I would like to learn about your methods. The request shocked everyone in the Great Hall. The galaxy's most famous scientist wanted to learn from the species he had called children playing with toys just 1 year ago. You would be welcome on Earth any time, Professor, Minho replied. As the test continued through the day, the collectors proved they could adapt to any challenge the sun threw at them. Solar wind, magnetic storms, radiation bursts, nothing could not stop them from working together. By the end of the day, the human collectors were providing enough energy to power every city on Earth. And this was just the beginning. The test had used only 100,000 collectors. The final system would use millions. In Seoul, the human team celebrated with pizza and soda. They had proven that humans could solve problems that ancient civilizations had given up on. But more importantly, they had shown the galaxy that cooperation and innovation could achieve anything. The age of impossible things was ending. The age of human solutions was just beginning. 1 year after the great demonstration, the galaxy was a different place. The human collectors around Earth's sun now numbered in the millions. They had become so efficient that Earth had more energy than it could use. For the first time in human history, power was free for everyone, but the real changes were happening far from Earth. Professor Velnash walked through the halls of the new Galactic Stellar Engineering Institute. The building had been built on a neutral moon, designed by humans and alien architects working together. It was beautiful and strange, part Earth University, part alien Crystal Palace. The old professor looked different now. He moved faster, with more energy. Learning new ideas had made him feel young again. He wore a simple human-style shirt instead of his fancy robes. His 8 arms carried books written by human scientists. Professor, are you ready for today's lecture? Asked Jung Na-Jung, a young human woman who worked as his assistant. She still could not believe that the galaxy's most famous scientist had asked her to help him learn. I am nervous, Velnash admitted. Today I must explain to my own people why I was wrong for 800 years. You weren't wrong, Na-Jung said kindly. You just didn't have all the information, no one did. They entered a large classroom filled with students from 20 different worlds. Crystal beings sat next to gas clouds held in metal containers. Creatures with fur sat near beings made of living metal. At the front of the room, Dr. Minho stood waiting. Minho was different too. His hair was a little gray now, and he wore the blue robes of the institute director. But his eyes still held the same curiosity that had driven him to question impossible things. Good morning, class, Minho said. Today, Professor Velnash will explain how the Stellar Harvest Impossibility Theorem has been officially changed to the Stellar Harvest Possibility Framework. Velnash moved to the front of the room. His voice was strong but humble. My fellow students, he began, and the words felt good to say. For 800 years I taught that stellar energy capture was impossible. I was not lying. I was not lazy. I simply could not imagine the solutions that these remarkable humans discovered. A young vegan student raised a crystal appendage. Professor, what was the biggest error in your original theorem? I assumed that bigger was always better, Velnash replied. I could only imagine solutions that involved massive structures. The humans showed us that millions of small, smart structures working together are far more powerful than one giant structure working alone. An Altarian student made a questioning sound. But how did the humans think of this when older species Did not? Velnash looked at Minho, who nodded encouragingly. Because humans are still young, they have not learned to give up on impossible things. They see problems as puzzles to be solved, not walls that cannot be climbed. Outside the classroom, the galaxy was busy proving Velnash's words. On the planet Vega Prime, crystal beings were building their own collector swarms using human designs. They had contacted Earth asking for help, offering rare materials in exchange for knowledge. The Altarian Republic had sent their best engineers to study with humans. Their gas giant worlds were perfect for testing collectors that could work in strong gravity and dangerous storms. Even the proud machine minds of the core worlds had admitted that human ideas were better than their own calculations. They were building the largest collector swarm in galactic history around their giant blue star. But the most amazing change was happening in the space between stars. For the first time in galactic history, energy was not scarce. Wars that had lasted for thousands of years suddenly ended because there was no reason to fight over resources anymore. Rojawan, Earth's new ambassador to the galaxy, sat in his office reading reports from across the stars. Each report told the same story. Unlimited energy was changing everything. On the desert world of Kepler 442, rain machines now brought water to places that had been dry for millions of years. On the ice world of Wolf 359, heating systems melted, frozen oceans, and created new seas full of life. But Jawan's favorite report came from a small space station where refugees from 100 different worlds lived together. The station had been powered by one small nuclear reactor that barely kept the lights on. Now, with energy from a human-designed collector swarm, the station had become a garden in space. Children from different species played together in green, parks under artificial suns. His communication device chimed. A message from the Galactic Council appeared on his screen. Ambassador Jawan, the message read. The Council formally requests that Earth share its stellar engineering knowledge with all member species. In return, the galaxy offers humanity full membership in the Galactic Alliance, including voting, rights, trade privileges, and protection under galactic law. Jawan smiled. 1 year ago, most aliens had thought humans were too young and stupid to matter. Now they were offering humanity equal partnership in running the galaxy. He sent a reply. Earth accepts, on one condition. All stellar engineering. Knowledge must be shared freely with every species, even those not in the Alliance. Energy should belong to everyone. Back at the Institute, Minho finished his afternoon lecture and walked to his favorite spot, the observation deck that looked out at the nearest star. Through the transparent walls, he could see thousands of tiny lights moving around the star. Collectors built by 6 different species, all working together using human principles. Yoon Hyun joined him at the window. She was now the head of the Institute's research department. Her team included scientists from 15 different worlds, all trying to solve problems that had seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Any regrets? She asked, watching the beautiful dance of collectors around the distant star. About what? About proving that impossible things are possible. Now everyone expects us to solve everything. Minho laughed. That's the best problem to have. Besides, we're not solving everything alone anymore. He pointed to the star, where collectors designed by humans, vegans, Altarians, and machine minds moved in perfect harmony. Look at that. Different species, different ideas, but they work together better than any of us could work alone. Just like us, Heian said. Just like us. As the two friends watched, a message appeared on the deck's communication screen. It was from a species humanity had never contacted before, from a galaxy far away. They had heard about human stellar engineering and wanted to learn. The message ended with words that made both humans smile. We have problems that seem impossible. Can you help us prove that impossible is just another word for difficult? Minho touched the reply button. We would be happy to try, he typed. But we should warn you, we're still learning too. The universe has many more impossible things waiting to be solved. He sent the message and turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, in the space between galaxies, new challenges waited. Bigger problems, stranger puzzles, things that even humans had not imagined yet. But for the first time in galactic history, No one was afraid of impossible problems anymore, because the universe had learned something important. When young minds meet old wisdom, when different species work together, when no one gives up on difficult questions, impossible things become inevitable things. The age of limitations was over. The age of possibilities had just begun, and somewhere in the great library of the Institute, a new book was being written. Its title was simple: A Complete Guide to Solving Impossible Problems. The first chapter was written by humans, but the rest would be written by everyone together.